Okay, irrigated native plants. Natives have a few little specialities, so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about things other than irrigation, because sometimes people's eyes do glaze over a little bit when we talk about it. I find it very fascinating, though. I think irrigation is really easy, and we'll try to make it as easy as possible. But let's give a little background information first. The United Nations estimates that the minimum amount of water that people need every day to clean themselves, to drink, and to cook is 13 gallons a day, per person per day. The U.S., there we are at the very top of the list. We use about 150 gallons per person per day. Now, the 13, that's a minimum. That's a minimum, right? But with global warming and things happening, we really need to get as close to the minimum as we can, because we need there to be a lot of water for everybody in the world. It's absolutely essential. We can't live without it. And the average U.S. household uses about 127,000 gallons per year. Who knows how much water they use per year? Raise your hand if you know how much water you use per year. Anybody? We have one person? No. No. Okay. This is very, very important. You can't change until you start measuring. You need to start measuring. Where are you at? Just like Deva and Peggy were both talking about taking some before pictures, where's your water at? You need to know where it's at so you can start making improvements on it. Okay, so 27,000 gallons per year. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's very, very easy for you to figure out how many gallons you use per year. We're not going to go through this too much, but your water district, whoever it is, most water districts in the Bay Area, it's a 2-month bill. You're billed for 2 months of water, and you're always billed in something called a CCF, right? CCF, and a CCF means the first C is 100, and then after that it's cubic feet. So a CCF is 100 cubic feet of water. It's 748 gallons. You now have all the tools you need to figure out how much you use in a year. Maybe you'll go home, I hope you'll go home, take the last 6 bills that you've had for the last year and calculate it out. Where do you fall? Are you above 127 gallons per year? Are you below that? Where do you fall? It's very, very easy to figure that out. And it's really good to read your water bill. I know this is irrigation, but you're going to need this. You are going to find times when all of a sudden your water bill shoots up, right? What does that mean?
Leak.
You've got a leak. You've got a leak. I've been in my house 18 years. I have found 3 major leaks. One was I was walking out in the backyard and it was smooshy. It was a main line to my valves. The main line had broken to the valves. I didn't know because I wasn't really paying attention to my water bill then. Another time, late at night, I could hear water running, but I knew nothing was on. It drove me crazy. I couldn't find water anywhere, but I could hear it late at night. I went through 3 plumbers. I finally got a guy who could really figure it out. There was a leak in the slab. I have a crawl space mostly, but there was a slab in one area, and there was a leak there. And then the third one was the main line to the house had developed a little leak. So you really need to watch your water bill. I mean, the last thing we want to do is waste water, right? The last thing we want to do is waste water. It's a very precious commodity. So I hope some of you will go home and figure out how much water do you use in a year. I do know how much water I use. How's the volume, by the way? Are we good on the volume? A little too high? Too hot? Just right? Just right, great. So since I've been in my current house, about 18 years, I've been tracking my water. I use about originally I used about 120 gallons per year, so that was a little bit less than the U.S. average. And I know that I use about 90,000 gallons inside the house and 30,000 gallons outside the house. Do you know how I figured that out? Any idea how you might figure that out? Yes?
Winter or summer?
Good. Explain. Winter or summer, she said.
Because you're taking the same number of showers year round.
Aha! So what she's saying is, now that only works, so what she says, you're taking the same number of showers every year. I mean, every day, mostly. Every week, mostly, let's say. If you turn your irrigation system off in, say, December, I used to always feel very confident about saying that. December, that's when your irrigation system should be turned off, except for last year, right? Last year we didn't get any rain until like March, but usually in September we're starting to turn it back. Maybe about 50% you should be turning your irrigation controller back from its summer high in July and August. And then by December, usually you can turn it off. And then what you see, you'll have a graph very similar to what I have, where in December, February, right, it's pretty flat. But then in the April, June through August, or through October, it's really tapering off, and you can kind of see that. But if you take this number and you turn your irrigation system off in December, you're going to have a really good idea of what you used inside the house. Okay? Very, very easy to figure out. Very easy. And then the rest of it, obviously, is what you're using outside the house. Now, if you wanted to get a little bit finer control on that, you could put a landscape meter in, and I'll talk a little bit about that, too. So I said 120,000 gallons per year is what I use. So this is what my water use looks like now. I no longer have any lawn, and I'm short one teenage daughter. Right? Okay. So now I'm about 106 gallons per year, about 85,000 gallons inside the house, so it went down a little bit, but I'm using quite a bit less outside. So I've actually tracked it. When I first moved in, we had, I don't think I have any pictures in here, my first yard, but it was all lawn. Really, the whole front yard was pretty much lawn. And there was a lawn in the backyard too. Slowly, slowly I took it out, and now I don't have any lawn anymore. So I'm about 20% for outdoor use, which is pretty good, pretty darn good. What you'll hear a lot is people talk about 50 to 30% is used outdoors. We can even do better than that. Even in California, where we have the toughest Mediterranean climate. Okay? Peggy talked about those 5 Mediterranean climates all around the world. We have the toughest one. That's because our temperature cycles are higher. We go higher temperature-wise, and we also have a longer period of drought. So our natives are really special. They have all kinds of different tips and tricks on how to survive during our long, long drought. So, okay. So what we're going to talk about today, a little bit on efficient irrigation. We're not going to talk too much about the nuts and bolts, but some. We're going to talk about organic soil care, and we're going to talk a lot about planting and establishing natives. Because even if you have the very best irrigation system, if you don't plant properly, if you don't take care of your soil, it's going to be hard. You can't expect the irrigation system to do it all. Sustainable landscaping is making all the parts work together. Natural landscaping, we're making all the parts work together. So let's talk about how to do that. Okay, but first, hopefully you know that there are several rebates. So let's talk about several of the rebates. I mean, this is the greatest thing. They'll pay you to put in new landscaping. Do you know how lucky we are? How many people are in Santa Clara Valley Water District? All right. How many of you knew that there's landscape rebates? Okay, that's about half of you. So let's talk about the landscape rebates. In Santa Clara Valley, pretty much they're the wholesaler. And for me, I'm in San Jose. I'm in the Willow Glen area of San Jose. So San Jose Water Company is my water district. But they get their water from Santa Clara Valley. They'll pay you 75 cents per square foot to take out your lawn. In Palo Alto, it's $1.50 per square foot. And there's maximums of either $2,000 or $3,000. And there's also some irrigation equipment rebates, and that's, East Bay Mud may have some, but I don't know of a lot of other water districts that have landscape rebates, and I'll talk about those as well. So that's a really good deal. I just found out last week that the Alameda County Water District has their own rebate. Anybody in Fremont, Union City, or Newark? All right. So they have a brand new program. They had been doing it with Bosca, who's one of our sponsors, and they decided to go out on their own, but it's very similar to Bosca's Lawn Be Gone. They will pay you 50 cents per square foot for taking out your lawn. They're mostly focused on front yards, and the reason for that is they really want to change the aesthetic. They want people to start thinking of California with boulders and mulch and deer grass and all these beautiful flowering penstemons and buckwheats, and not necessarily European grasses. So they're really trying to change the aesthetic. And that program is effective July 1st. They say that they want to close it out before the end of the year, but I'm pretty sure they're going to resubscribe. Stephanie Penn is the person in Alameda County Water District to talk to you about this. She can get you all set up. Now, a really important thing to know is that before you do any of these programs, you need to have them come out and look at your yard. And a lot of times they're going to be going inside the house too, and they'll talk to you about rebates for toilets and all that things, but do not take your lawn out unless they've come out first, okay? And then people say, well, my lawn is really brown, and I'm not sure if they would give me credit for it. Green it up. It only takes like a week of water to green it up. As long as you have some kind of a working irrigation system, put it on for a week before they're going to come out, and then and take advantage of that. And there's one more that I want you to know about, and that's Lawn Be Gone. They're more up in San Mateo County, but just Google Lawn Be Gone, and they have a list of, it's not all the water districts up there, but it's a lot of the water districts up there. So just talk to them. It's pretty much the same thing. They like to focus on front yards. It's 50 cents a square foot, have them come out beforehand. A lot of them have a plant list, a specific plant list for you to choose from. So make sure you are going off of their plant list. There's lots and lots of natives on those plant lists. If you see a plant that's not on their list, you can always ask them. As long as it's a low or very low water plant, they will usually allow it. So there's lots of flexibility. They do all want you to have mulch, usually 3 inches of mulch. And they do like to see about 50% of the area planted. A couple years ago, they used to let you just pull your lawn out and just cover it with bark mulch. They don't allow. They want some greenery. We want there to be habitat also, leading into our next presentation. Okay. This was a really interesting study. So I'm here to talk about irrigation. And the question we should always ask first, do I need to irrigate? Yes and no. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But there was a study that the American Water Works Association did. And they did a survey of U.S. residents, and they figured out an average water that they were using for landscapes. An average amount of water they were using for landscapes. And they found that people who hand watered used 33% less than average. Why is that? What was that?
You don't want to stand there.
We don't want to stand there holding the hose and watering. So we become very, very efficient when we do that. Some people like it. Some people really like hand watering. Yes, Deborah?
Is hand watering, does that include setting the sprinkler, the hose end sprinkler out and walking away?
There's a lot of danger to doing that. So Deborah asked, does hand watering mean setting the sprinkler out, say, by the base of a tree or something like that and just walking away? I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. And we'll get into some more of the reasons why not. You'll probably waste some water doing that. Certainly there are certain plants that need some deep water, but at least set a timer. Definitely set a timer, and I'll talk more about that. So they studied this, and they also looked at spray irrigation. And spray irrigation system, you automatically use 35% more water than average. Why do you think that might be?
Evaporation. Blows away.
Okay. Ooh, I like this. Is a good group. This is a good group. Okay. Spray.
Define spray. What do you mean?
Spray is a. It could be
Sprinklers?
a sprinkler head. Yes, spray. It's either a pop-up or a stationary head that is spraying water out. I have a picture later on of what the spray looks like. But yeah, that is typically spray. So I was going to do this a little bit later, but let's talk about spray irrigation. Why are we using more for spray?
Because we put a lawn.
Evaporation.
Evaporation. So in order for there to be evaporation, what time of the day or what's the temperature like? Tell me. What's the temperature? It's usually hot. What time of day? Midday. Yeah, midday you would tend to see the most evaporation. So we're going to talk about spray versus drip, but let's try, even if you're not going to change your spray, let's try to make it as efficient as possible. So I'll talk about. So if you were going to water with spray, when should you do it? Early in the morning. It's nice and cool, the temperatures are lower, you're not going to get as much evaporation. Okay, what are some other inherent problems with spray, or why we would use more water? Yes?
You overspray and cover the concrete.
Overspray. Yes, you're overspraying onto the concrete. So spray is really good if your lawn is a square or a rectangle or something. It's really not good if your lawn looks like this. Right? Really hard to do those curves with spray. Okay, so overspray. Okay, other ways. Yes?
Over watering, because you're over timing it and you're not looking at how much water is actually being absorbed.
Very good. Let's say the precipitation, I don't know if that's the right word, but let's do this. So spray delivers water faster than our soils can absorb it. So let's say too fast.
Runoff.
Runoff.
Right. It's and there could be a couple reasons for runoff, but it's delivering the water much faster than our clay soils can absorb it. Okay? So then we'll get runoff onto the sidewalk. Also, if there's a slope, we could also get runoff. Okay. So other ideas. Yes.
Broken sprinkler.
Broken. Now, a lot of people think that spray has less problems than drip. I've had both. I've had more problems with spray personally than I have. And when you have a broken head, it's a lot more dramatic, isn't it? Right? I run in the mornings and I'm always going and knocking on my neighbors' doors because they're watering in the morning, right? They don't see it. And they've got a geyser out in front. And their landscaper may not see it because they may not have it tested. So broken. Okay. Any other ways that we might have? Yes, Steve.
Mist. In other words, wind blowing this water.
Mist.
It goes to your neighbor's house.
Mist. Okay. Mist is really good. So mist can be because of a couple of different things. What's one reason why we might get mist? Steve?
Overpressure.
Oh, God, you're good. Too much pressure. Okay. And I think Deba talked about that, having a pressure regulator on a drip system. You also need a pressure regulator on your spray system. Most spray systems are designed to be used at 30 psi, pounds per square inch. Anybody know what their pressure is at their house? 70, 85, 90 or more. So, twice as much, 3 times as much as what a spray system is designed to handle. When you have really high pressure, you're not getting drops anymore. You're getting this really fine, misty stuff. And you'll start to see. You go around to some of your neighbors, and you'll see they'll be watering, and there'll be a big cloud over their house, right? It's all this mist that they've generated, okay, because it's overpressure. Now there's another reason why we might have, I don't want to say misting, but a problem with spray irrigation. Wind. Somebody said wind. Good. A lot of areas of the Bay Area, in the afternoon, the winds really pick up. So you really want to try to water when it's still and you're not having as much. Yes, you have another?
Yeah, blocking plants, if they block the...
Plants! Right. Let's see, plants blocking. Now usually if you're doing lawn, you're having like a 4 to a 6-inch pop-up. If you're doing landscape plants, you know, maybe a 12-inch, but our plants are higher than that. So sometimes it's really hard to get that water out into the rest of the garden. I know as landscapers, we try to note where the sprinkler heads are and kind of plant around them, but you know, it can be a problem as they get bigger. So any other problems with spray? Yes?
Spraying on a rainy day.
Exactly. During rain. And that's just waste, right? Just absolute waste. So what can we do so that we're not spraying on a rainy day? Steve?
Get a smart controller.
Get a smart controller, or that's one good one. Sometimes they're not quite that fast to turn off right as it's raining, but a rain sensor is something that will immediately turn your irrigation system off, okay? So, spray irrigation, it's inherently less efficient, say, than hand watering where you're going right to the plant, okay? So we're automatically using more water when we spray irrigate. But there are several things we can do to make sure that we get as much of that water to the plants, okay? Also, if we add automatic watering, we're again, overwatering. And why is that?
We're not paying attention.
We're not paying attention. We're not turning it off when it's raining. We're not turning it down in the fall and turning it up in the spring, or turning it off in the winter time. So we're overwatering. Okay. Drip irrigation, we're still using a little bit more water than whatever that average is, that magic average, but it's much, much less. And there's new technologies to make the drip more efficient. Okay.
Question?
Yes.
There was a recommendation up there of only 50% water in September.
Yes.
Is that for California? Because,
Yes. Yes.
you know, September is often the hottest month, the driest month we've got.
It is. It's dry. Yes, it's very dry. But our days are much shorter, and they're getting much cooler at night. And I don't know if you've noticed that. I'm not saying turn it off altogether. I'm saying just lower it. And if you don't feel comfortable with 50%, I'd be happy if you just did 75 or 70 or just see. You know, usually, in fact, my husband was saying something about, oh, it's been very cool. It's like, well, we haven't hit Indian summer yet. Usually it's a little bit earlier in September, but we're hitting it right now. It's more into October. Well, we almost always have some kind of Indian summer where it gets really hot in September. So you're right. We do get some hot days. Okay. One more question?
Have you ever worked with sensors in the ground that sense the moisture and actually control the amount that lets the sprinkler?
I know. That just seems so ideal, doesn't it? So the question is, what about moisture sensors? Doesn't that make sense? Moisture sensors? So they know exactly what the moisture level is. I don't know any contractor or any kind of landscaper who really swears by them. Deva?
No. We've
Peggy?
used them.
You've tried them?
Yeah.
We've all tried them. But it's very hard because your soil might be different in different parts of your yard. You might have a different exposure in different parts of your yard. So we still haven't perfected that. I'm still hoping. I'm still hoping for a new technology that will really help that. Okay, now we're going to start moving fast because I know we're going slow, a little bit slower than I wanted to. Okay, so the first question is, do I need irrigation at all? Most of my customers will say, yeah, put some kind of irrigation system in, that'll be just great. I do have some, though, that say, I don't want one. I absolutely don't want one. Can you design me a yard without any kind of an irrigation system and guarantee the plants will do fine. Yes, we can. We absolutely can. I did tell these people, you are going to have to hand water the first couple of summers. You just have to do it. And I have to tell you, I was sweating a little bit because they were not gardeners. They didn't know about plants, you know, and the husband was really not sure any of this would work. Why do we need to redesign? All this stuff. He ended up being the one that would get off work and water. I don't know if he had a beer or a glass of wine or whatever, but that became his job. He loved it, and they did an absolute beautiful job with their landscape. You know, they knew that they would lose a few plants, and they were okay with that. And even if you have irrigation, you're going to be losing a few plants. I mean, it happens. We don't get everything right. Sometimes we need to work at it a little bit. But you can absolutely have a beautiful lawn by hand watering, or once it's established, not watering at all. I have a front border on my house. It's about 80 feet long by about 6 feet wide, and I never, ever water it at all, ever. Okay? I've got some oaks there. I've got some woolly blue curls. I've got some iris. And everything does fine without water. So as you're thinking about redesigning, think about having one area where maybe there are some very low water plants, even some low water plants. If they get a little bit of shade, maybe in the hot afternoons or something, you can very much have a part of your lawn, or part of your yard, excuse me, that has no water, no irrigation system at all, as long as you're willing to get it established. Either by hand watering, or you could possibly do some temporary irrigation to a section and then pull it out, okay? These are just some of the plants that they have. We already talked about the St. Catherine's Lace, which again they are selling out in front. Toyon is on your right-hand side. And I'm not going to talk a lot about plants. Oh, the clematis. They're selling the chaparral clematis also out there. It's a deciduous vine. It's the one on your left. Beautiful flowers in the spring and really great seed heads. I don't have a picture of the seed heads. We've already talked about the western redbud, which is on your right as well. All of those plants will do very well. They're all very low or low water plants. Okay, but what we're really here to talk about is irrigation. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about what the components. Oh, first I want to talk about Hydra Zoning. Even if you are planning on hand watering, you can take into account for different water needs of different plants. But it's much easier if you just Hydra Zone. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's much easier if you Hydra Zone. So all the landscapers do this. If you have some mature trees in your yard, you're going to want to find out what the water is of that particular species. So in this yard, it's a little hard for me to show you, but can everybody see section 1 that's in kind of purple? So this is a house in Los Gatos. They had fruit trees in that area, section 1. Fruit trees, there were citrus trees, a lemon and an orange. Most citrus trees are medium water. So in that area, we picked native plants that had more of a medium water regime. You can go low as long as they're the right kind. You can kind of mix it a little bit, but you don't want to put a lot of low water plants under, say, a birch or vice versa, okay? In area 2, that's kind of blue, that's where they had some vegetables. Most vegetables, again, are about a medium water, unless you're doing dry farming tomatoes, and then they would be more low. The larger green area, they really didn't have a lot of plants, or the plants they had were low water. So we really concentrated on all the low water California natives in that area. So Hydra Zoning, even if you're hand watering, it's really nice to group plants with the same water needs, just like you would group plants that like clay soil together, okay? They just do better. Okay, now if you're wondering, well, the plants that I have in my yard, how do I know what kind of water requirements they have? There's an excellent resource that we have here in California called the Water Use Classification of Landscape Plants. Whew. We call it WCALS. Okay, WCALS, much easier. You can find this by Googling it. It's a PDF. It's available free, and they're just about to. They're revising it. Yeah, they're revising it. I have a list of plants that we'll have to talk about. They want to increase the number of plants that they have, and they're collecting water requirements from different people. But this is a great thing. So you'll put in, say, azalea, and you'll look up what region you're in. We're in region 1. It's the first column in WCALS. Okay? You'll just type in the name of your plant, and it'll tell you high, which is usually lawns and birches. Medium, which is a lot of our fruit trees, and there's a lot of natives that are medium too. Low and very low, that's it. 4 categories of plants. It's really, really great. It's a really good resource. And a lot of other states don't have something similar, so we're very lucky to have that. Okay, so let's talk about what spray is good for. Okay, if you're in a more inland area and say, maybe you want to have a coastal native plant community, redwood community. You know, those plant communities are used to having moisture in the form of fog come through. So in that case, having a spray system might be kind of nice just to get the air, the water moisture, the air moisture up a little bit higher, okay? But really, I think that's probably the only reason to use spray, because it is inherently inefficient because of all the reasons that we talked about. And the one other inefficiency that we didn't talk about was this one. Poor design. And I see that a lot. You know, people wonder, there's that one spot in your lawn that's brown, right? Because somebody didn't design the irrigation system properly. And what do we do when we see a brown spot in our lawn? We water more. Even though the rest of it doesn't need it, just that one spot does. So poor design also, I see that a lot. Spray irrigation, they're supposed to be head to head. In other words, the spray from one head should hit the other head. That's what we call head to head. That's what they're designed for. And a lot of times that's not how they are when I come out to take a look at it. So they're inherently inefficient for many reasons. But if you have lawns under existing trees, you may want to have some kind of a spray system so you can kind of shoot the water in and not disturb the trunks of the trees. That's also kind of we have ways of getting around that also. Spray also can damage and stain fences and wooden structures, and you see that all the time, that gray area that's on fences that have been sprayed. It also uses PVC pipe, which is not a great plastic. It's one of the bad plastics, so we try to minimize our use of it. And none of the rebates, if you have spray irrigation, you won't qualify for any of the rebates. None of the rebates allow you to keep a spray irrigation system. So get over it. Let's move on. Yes, David.
I'm using spray for a native meadow, simply because it's the only way I can reliably germinate the annual seeds.
It's true. Yep.
Everything else is drip in my native
Yep.
garden, but that,
Then you're doing as much as you can do.
I have to use spray there.
Yep. So he's talking about trying to germinate the seeds in his native meadow, and if they're germinating at times when it's not raining, he wants to give a little bit of supplemental water in order to keep those seeds germinating. So if you're doing that, then you're doing the best that you can, especially if the rest of it is in drip, okay? So I believe that drip is good for many, many areas, and it's much, much more efficient than spray is. It's about 90 to 99% efficient, so you're really losing a lot less. And for curves and things like that, it does really, really well. Okay? Most drip uses polyethylene, which is that black plastic, I'm going to pass some of that around, or polyethylene and PVC. So again, we're using less PVC, and it also qualifies for all the rebates. Okay. So the components of a drip irrigation system, we're going to need some kind of a backflow preventer. Does anybody know what a backflow preventer is? What does it do? A backflow preventer. Yes, lady in green.
Keeps the water from going backwards into the house.
Into the house. Keeps the water from going backwards into the house. Very, very rarely, but occasionally, the pressure in the lines, we get our water and it's forcing that pressure against our house. That's why we get the 90 psi or the 70 psi. Occasionally something might happen and that pressure might go the other way. And you could actually suck nasty stuff. You guys don't have anything nasty in your garden, but you could suck things into the house from your irrigation system. So a backflow preventer, make sure the water can go out to the landscape but can't go back. So you'll see like these brass things in the landscape, right? They're about this tall and brass. Those are different kinds of backflow preventers. We also have in this picture, you have an anti-siphon valve. That will also work. And you also have, if you have a newer house, you'll see an anti-siphon device on all of your hose bibs or faucets outside, and I'll point those out. Okay, we already talked about pressure regulators, that you need them even on spray systems, and I said 30 psi was what most spray systems are designed for. A lot of the drip, it can be a little bit higher, but you don't want to go more than 50 psi, so you want to be below 50 psi for spray, for drip. And we see here the built-in pressure regulator here, and that one is for 40 psi. You'll also need some kind of a filter. Now, I have a lot of people who will say, drip doesn't work, it always clogs, and then I'll check their system and they won't have any kind of a filter on it. You absolutely have to have some kind of a filter. The drip systems are much tinier holes. Okay, we'll pass this one around. So I've got two drip emitters on that little piece, and one has a long spaghetti. See, this is a test. This is a test. You have to stay awake. So we have the punch-in emitters on that, and you'll see one has a little bit of what Deva was calling spaghetti tubing, the 1/4 inch spaghetti tubing. Remember that. Okay. So you have to have some kind of a filter. That's going to get rid of a lot of the dirt particles in there and keep your emitters from clogging. So you absolutely have to have that. Now the emitters, when I took design classes, it was all these punch-in. How many people have done a punch-in drip system? Did your thumb hurt for a couple weeks afterwards? They're hard, aren't they? They're very, very hard. So a new advancement is something called an inline emitter. And these are just great. Thank you, Charlie, thank you. So this is a tubing. You can see it you can see it here. This is 1/4 inch with an inline emitter in it. It's just a little bulge. But the emitter, if you look through here, or that one, it's actually cut away. The outside is actually cut away so you can see the emitter. So all the emitters are already pre-installed. And that just saves you so much time. And they actually work better, they clog less than the punch-in ones. So they're really, really good and fun and easy to use. Thank you. And then you need some kind of an end cap or a flush valve. Now this one I'm showing just a little simple compression end cap, and you can use those. We also have some that have like barbed fittings, and I tend to like the barbed fittings better on drip. I think they stay together a little bit better. But once a year, at least once a year, and the manufacturers will all tell you every month that your irrigation system is on, you should be cleaning your filter and flushing. So the flushing means you open that end valve. So if it's one of these, you open the cap, You turn on your system and you let all the water run through for, a couple minutes or something. That just means if there's any dirt in the lines, that it just flushes out. Do that once a year at least at the beginning of the irrigation system or startup of your system, which would be in, March or April, depending on the weather. Okay? So if you clean the filter, and these little Y filters are really easy to clean. You just kind of open them up and just maybe scrub it a little bit if there's some mold or something in there. I usually open them up, they look perfectly clean, put them back together again. But the flushing, you really do need to do the flushing. So it's real easy, very easy to maintain and put together. You can also do something off of a faucet or hose bib if you don't have access to a valve. I don't do that very often. Usually we are using some kind of a valve. But if you need to, or if you want to put together something really quick and start to really learn about drip, this is a very easy way to do it. And here I was talking about an anti-siphon device at the faucet. These are all, for all new housing, they have to have some kind of device like that. And again, it just keeps the water from going into your house. There's a little battery-operated controller there. There is a pressure regulator here, and then there's that Y valve filter, again, there.
Sherri,
Yes.
are you going to mention something about the incompatibility of fittings on certain...
Probably not.
Okay, never mind.
But you're right. So, there are hose fittings and pipe fittings. They're a little bit different, of course. The threads are a little bit different. We don't have time to go into
No, that wasn't what I meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was it?
What I meant was, in drip irrigation, you can get this tubing, and just make sure that you get the fittings that go with the tubing.
Okay.
That one.
Some of them, some of
Different
the tubings,
brands.
yes. So I like Netafim, and I'll talk more about them, but they're 17 millimeters, and the other ones are 15? I think that's how it is. I think Netafim is a little bit bigger. So she's right. Make sure whatever you decide on, and I'll talk a little bit more about resources, that you get the fittings that go with that. And I think one of them that I sent around had a brown barbed fitting. That was a Netafim fitting. So when you buy them, do make sure you get them all for the same product. Okay, very good. Okay, so 2 drip methods. The only reason I bring this up is because originally when I learned how to do drip, we were always talking about how many emitters each plant needed, okay? And you can still absolutely do it this way. You always need at least 2 emitters per plant. I would never do it without at least 2 emitters, one on either side of the plant, okay? And then if you're mixing low water and medium water plants, so you might put 2 emitters on a low water plant, and then if you had a medium water plant, you might put 4 emitters on that one, okay? So you can do it in this method. It's a very good method when the plants are small. I think it's a very good method because the emitters are right near the root ball. It's less expensive to install because you're using less tubing. But I also feel like it limits root and plant growth because let's say some of our native ground covers, you'll buy a 1-gallon can. That puppy's going to get to be 6 to 8 feet in diameter. Even though, so if we're talking Baccharis or some of the low Manzanitas, some of them are more like 6 feet, but they're like 6 to 8 feet. Some are even as big as 12 feet. Okay, so you really want to make sure that you're getting water to that whole root zone as much as you can. All right? And roots, what are roots looking for? Water. They're looking for water. So if your water is right near the base of the plant, they're going to get watered in the wintertime, so they'll spread out again. But, sometimes we want them to grow in the summertime too. So it's really good to have your root zone covered with emitters. And I don't want to say covered, but you want to have them spaced so that the water is wet and available for the roots to reach out for. Okay, you want to develop a good root system on your plants. Because when you do that, then if there is a drought, they're going to last through that drought much better than a plant that has a smaller root system. Okay? I said it requires more maintenance, but I really don't think it does. The beauty of this is you can adjust the watering depending on what type of plants and how much water they need. Okay, so there is some beauty to that.
Sharon?
Yes. Somebody have a question? Yes, I'm sorry.
My experience with the per plant method is you're typically not using inline emitters, but maybe you are. But you're using the spaghetti tubing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot more leaks at all those connections.
Yes.
And so that's where the increased maintenance comes from.
You're probably right. That's probably exactly what I was thinking, that they are harder to maintain. Yeah. Usually I find if a system is going to break, it's going to break wherever the connections are. So if you're using a lot of fittings, either an elbow fitting or a three-way fitting, that always seems to be the place where it breaks. So to try to do a system without those fittings is always a lot better. So let's talk about doing it more in a grid method. And it was years before I started hearing about this grid method, and I just really, really liked it. Because it's really you're really watering more of a zone. And again, if you're Hydra zoned, which I encourage you to do that, it really doesn't work unless you Hydra zone. You can, I always get people that ask me, well, can't you add some more emitters? Yes, you could add some more emitters. But, if we're trying to be low water and we're trying to get a rebate, it's probably a low or a very low water plant that we're putting in. So this method, I think, really works. You can do it in a grid. You can do it a couple of different ways. So you can do it in a real grid like this. And maybe the emitters are here, 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 here. Here's some emitters, like that. But an even better way is to do it like this. Because here I'm going to have some kind of an elbow. Here's a three-way. Fitting. A better way to do it is like this. Okay? You're doing the same thing, but now I have much less fittings. I have one three-way here, but I still have all my emitters. They're still spaced pretty much the same way. And I find this works a lot better. Okay? And again, it's doing the whole entire zone. Now, some of the bad parts of this, when your plants are small, this is fairly inefficient, isn't it? Because I'm watering areas where my plants may not be. Okay? So you could hand water a little bit if you wanted to, or you could just accept that there'll be some waste at the beginning. Okay? I think it's better for long-term growth, but it is more expensive to install, and you absolutely must Hydra zone. Okay, we're going to move. So, if you have some kind of a native lawn, maybe that you want to put in, or a meadow, you can still do drip, even if you're planning to mow that area. Okay, you could still do drip, but in this case, you're going to do it subsurface. So subsurface drip works really well. You want it below the ground because you're going to mow. Okay? It's very, very efficient because it's right at the root zone of the plant. And people ask, well, how far down? I really like the Netafim product for this, and I'll show you a slide on that. Usually like 4 to 6 inches below the surface of the ground. Okay? Is usually where you do it. So in this case, we have a Carex Panza lawn. That's on the left. That's at my house. On the right, we have, you can see where it's actually going in. There's the header board, and you can see all the drip, and you can see the little wet spots where the drip emitters are in line, right? And there was going to be another native lawn going in there. That's at the Smart Station in Sunnyvale. And even a regular European lawn, this is one in South San Jose, it works perfectly fine for that. What's kind of nice about it too is it's dry during the summer, it's never wet. So if you have kids and are playing on lawn, it's really nice that it's dry when they want to play on it. You don't get as much weeds sprouting in the summertime when it's warm because again the water is below. And the one product I recommend for this is the Netafim, which is an Israeli company. The Israelis invented drip irrigation because they live where? In a desert. So they really invented drip. The Netafim product, it's their Techline CV that I really like. There are some other vendors who have products that go subsurface. I don't have as much experience with them. I know this one works. I am testing some of the other ones to make sure that they work, but I don't have as much experience with them, so I can't recommend them yet. But hopefully I will be able to shortly. Okay? And then we were talking about changing your controller depending on the weather. I'm not going to talk about this a lot, but there are ET or smart controllers that are brand new, the last 10 years, I would say. And they really take the guesswork out of when you should adjust your controller. They do it for you. They either are connected up to a weather station, a local weather station, or they have their own weather station. If they connect up to a weather station, there's usually some kind of a monthly fee, $4 to $5. It's pretty minimal. And if they have their own weather station, then there's no fee. This has a little rain sensor, rain collector actually, and temperature. So if your temperature gets high and it's dry, it's going to water a little bit more. Okay, if it's cooler, it's going to water a little bit less. It takes that all into account. There's many manufacturers who have these products, so they're out there. Okay, I did want to talk about some irrigation rebates very quickly. As far as I know, this is only in Santa Clara Valley Water District. East Bay Mud may have some too. But I already talked about rain sensors turning off when it's raining. So Santa Clara Valley can get up to $50 per rain sensor. And there's also something called high efficiency nozzles. So again, if you really like spray, but we talked about how it applies water too fast, these high efficiency nozzles are really good for that. And if you need some kind of an irrigation controller for your new system, they will basically pay for your irrigation controller as long as it's some kind of a smart controller. So they'll give you up to $300 for a 1 to 12 station irrigation controller. So I'll talk to a client and they'll say, well, I don't really need a smart station. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can get you a regular one, but you'll have to pay for it. Well, this one's free. You get a rebate. So they usually go for that. Okay, rotors. So this is a pretty recent development. Hunter came out with rotors. So you see a spray irrigation system on the left, and then you see a rotor on the right, and they have this pattern. It's mesmerizing. They kind of circle. It really is. It's very relaxing to kind of watch them. But they apply water much slower than our spray heads do. So they're much better for our clay soils. Okay? I had an interesting experience at this one. It was at the Sunnyvale Smart Station. We were kind of reviewing some of the plantings, and we noticed this one area the plants really weren't doing well. And they did have drip in certain areas and spray heads in the other. Well, this one particular area, we didn't realize they had rotors. They had switched to rotors. You have to water more if you have rotors, right? It's applying it slower, so you have to irrigate longer, okay? All right. We're going to talk a little bit about soil, because soil is very important for having a good irrigation system. Believe it or not, healthy, humusy soil. We know that the top 6 inches of soil is where all our plant growth happens. Without that top 6 inches, we wouldn't have anything to eat, okay? So it's very important. This is one of our major, it's a natural capital, is our topsoil, and we need to keep it as much as possible. It supports plant growth. It also holds water, and I'll talk more about that, and it cleans water. As Deva was saying, if you have mycorrhizae and fungi and bacteria in your soil, they're looking for things to eat. If you have petrocarbons or hydrocarbons, like say on your driveway or something, and that gets into the soil, those creatures are very good at breaking down those hydrocarbons and cleaning the water as it goes through. So what you see all over the Bay Area now is we used to send the water from driveways and parking lots out into the storm drain system, which flows to the bay. We don't do that anymore. We try to get the water into the ground for a couple of reasons. To clean it, because the soil microorganisms are very good at cleaning, but the aquatic ones are terrible at cleaning water. It's all in soil and in marshes. And then the other reason is that we have a lot of underground aquifers in the Bay Area. We want to get as much water into those aquifers as possible, because that's where we draw some of our water from. And I know I'm going to run out of time, but there are numerous, okay, so there was that bad news that came out about the Stanford study, right? Anybody remember the Stanford study? Organic vegetables don't have more nutrition than those that are grown non-organically, okay? And the one thing that I can tell you that I've heard year after year after year is that organic soils hold moisture. Organic soils are much better when we have a drought than our soils that are pumped full of chemicals. And this was the city of Redmond, Washington. They have a standard where they're really trying to get compost into their soil. The moisture holding capacity and moisture retention capacity of soil as a result of compost applications, they find that it has increased in the moisture holding capacity. Therefore, incorporation of compost into the soil of turf sites and also our native sites will reduce the need to irrigate. So not only is it healthy for the soil, it also holds much more water. So they found that on a typical site in Redmond, Washington, with little slope and wind, the irrigation needs are reduced by 60% as compared to unamended soil, topsoil. So more reasons, thank you, more reasons to get compost or woody mulch on top of your soil, or compost teas. You're really adding to the moisture holding ability of our soil. I wanted to talk to you about this one site. This was in San Jose. Devin knows this site. It was a new housing development, and what they do with new housing developments, they strip off the topsoil and all plant life, and then they build the houses, and they don't ever put the topsoil back. It's gone, you know. So I went out to this site. It was the middle of winter. They had this really big downpour. There were puddles everywhere in the backyard and no weeds. You know what that means? It couldn't even support weed. Yeah, it was sterile. The soil was absolutely sterile. So we really needed to get more life into this. So I don't have time to go through all of this, but there's some really good books on the soil food web. Deva touched on it a little bit. Sterile soil, you're not going to get a lot of plant growth. As you increase the abundance of microorganisms in the soil, the better plant growth you're going to get. And that's what that slide shows. Okay, so I did want to talk a little bit about how to plant natives, because there are some tricks that can ensure your success. So, we know native plants were designed to grow when it's warm and dry and cool and wet. So when you have a combination of our clay soil that's very nutritious to our plants but holds water, and you're watering when it's warm, you can foster crown and root rots. Very bad for native plants. A sure way to kill them. So there's a couple of things. So there's certain natives that are susceptible to these root rots. They really need really good drainage. So woolly blue curls, that's the one that Peggy was talking about, smells like bubble gum. You have to be very, very careful. Drainage has to be very good, or don't water. Like I said, I have it in an unirrigated area, and it does great. Cleveland sage also. Some of the sages are susceptible to these crown and root rots. Okay, so you either have to make sure that they have good drainage, or you have to be very careful about watering. So some things you can do, Deborah was talking about mounds. We also call those berms. So if you have leftover soil when you're taking out your lawn, you do want to kind of mound it up. That's a good place for natives that like a little bit better drainage. So I don't know if you can tell, but right in front of this box, there's just a little bit of a mound there where we planted some natives that need better drainage. This is at my own house. I have 3 Salvia Allen Chickering, and they're again on top of a mound with a little bird bath. They're doing great. They've been there 3 years. I water, but very, very sparingly in that area. And you can also do a little bit of amending to your soil to make it drain better. And there's an excellent article on the web. It's called Improving Clay Soils. It's by Fine Gardening. So if you did Improving Clay Soils, Fine Gardening, really excellent. It gives you, it's in lay terms. They go through a little bit of science, but not too much. And they just talk about how wonderful compost is for soils at really adding drainage, aggregating some of those particles, really creating spaces in the soil so water can drain out. Yes?
I wanted to ask about the oyster shells for that.
Yes.
Is there a rule of thumb on how much to use per cubic?
Deva, do you have a rule of thumb on the oyster shells?
I just sprinkle it like that.
A dusting.
I don't
We
know
would call that a
exactly-
dusting.
I don't know how much goes on.
But definitely some compost, some oyster shells. Some people will add some gravel. You can do that too. But really, I really like compost. Okay, so planting techniques. This is what I recommend. When you plant your natives, you want the hole to be about twice as wide as the can that it came in. So if it's a gallon, it needs to be twice as wide. I usually sometimes kind of take 2 empty 1-gallon cans and go, oh, that's about 2 times, that's good. Now we used to plant plants deeper. We used to make the hole deeper than the size of the can, and we don't do that anymore. And the reason that we don't is if you turn up that soil, you're making it a little softer, and then the plant has a tendency to settle in that soil. And we don't want our natives to settle. We want them to stay a little bit high. So I usually recommend slightly above finished grade, maybe up to 1 inch above finished grade. You also want to make sure that it's kind of tapered around the base of the plant so the water will run away from it. As Deva and Peggy both said, you don't want to have the mulch right up against the base of the plant, and definitely not for trees and woody shrubs. Okay? And again, when I backfill, I usually backfill with a little bit of compost. You're adding some, if it's live compost, you're adding some microorganisms, and you're also helping to kind of give it a little bit of nutrition and kind of help break up the soil a little bit. So that's what I would really recommend for planting. And there are, oh shoot, it didn't come. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a slide there. I'm sorry, it didn't come through. But there is a really nice list of clay-tolerant plants that is on the Yerba Buena Nursery website. I'd really take a look at that, and there's, at least 100 species on there. So if you know you have really hard, heavy clay, you don't want to do a berm or anything like that, then pick up some clay-tolerant species. That's a really good way to go. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is we've been talking about too much water and how you could get a phytophthora, which is those, they're called water molds, and that's that crown and root rot. You can actually have too little water to your plants. And I know that sounds right, but you might be watering and you still are not getting water to that plant. Does anybody know how that happens? I'm watering. How is that plant not getting water? Anybody? I'm watering, but the plant's not. Say again?
It's hydrophobic.
It's hydrophobic. So what that means is a lot of the mediums that you buy, the plant comes in, has soil in the pot, right? Sometimes it's not really soil. Sometimes it's peat or sand or core, coconut fibers. It's a lot of other things. Sometimes those can get really dry. You've had bags of peat moss, right? Have you ever tried to water peat moss in a bag before you use it? It just rolls right off of there. It really has a hard time getting wet. So I had a situation where we had planted this whole area and the plants just weren't doing very well at all. And I'm like, this is impossible. These are great plants. You're watering all the time. Why are they not getting wet? Well, we took a moisture meter and we're, 6 inches away from the plant, wet, 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 really wet. Then we went right to the base of the plant, okay, where the medium was from when it was in the pot. Bone dry, bone dry. That can very easily happen. The water in clay soils, clay really grabs water and it doesn't really want to let it go, especially if it's a drier area. So you have to be very careful to get those areas really wet. So I really encourage hand watering if you're willing to do that. Make sure you really, like Deva said, water the plant in the can, then water it once it's in the ground, and keep an eye on it and really test with, very easy to test with some, a moisture meter that you use for your house plants. Just really test at the base of the plant. Make sure that that's really getting wet. You can also do something, if you've done that grid method, they have these little adapters so that you can get the water from your Netafim line. Maybe that line's 12 inches away, but you can actually get some spaghetti tubing and get it right to the base of the plant. And then as that plant gets bigger, you can cut that back. So it's farther, and the water is farther and farther back, and then you can finally take that off altogether. So there's lots of different strategies for how to do that. And some people will actually get rid of the medium on the plant. This is a little bit more laborious for landscapers, but you can actually take that soil medium off, mix it in with your natural clay soil, and then backfill with that. And that really helps to make sure that you can get water to the babies. So just to take you on a little very quick journey. So this is a bird sanctuary in San Jose. This is always on the native plant tour. Lawn replacement with a before and after, and then 18 species of native plants in the front yard. Another front yard with some paving and a lot of native plants and a little bird bath. You can see the California fuchsias and some rosy buckwheats, some Salvia clevelandii. Pool removal, where we put in all native plants, and the centerpiece was a fountain, a stone fountain. And then further information on irrigation. Bosca, who's a sponsor here, has classes. They have a couple of classes coming up. These are 3-hour classes that I highly recommend by Lori Palmquist. One's on October 6th, next Saturday, and that's in Redwood City, and one's at the Sunnyvale Senior Center on October 20th. The Urban Farmer Store is a little bit far for some of us, but they have really good classes in the wintertime. They have a lot of their classes. And then if you want to look for some of these drip irrigations, the hardware stores don't always have the products that I would necessarily recommend, but there are a lot of irrigation stores like Horizon and Ewing and Water Savers. They're all around the Bay Area, and they're a really good place to get your supplies from. And I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sherri. We have time for one question.
On this grid setup, what's your rule of thumb for the spacing based on soil type?
Yeah, so for, sorry. So for clay soil, usually we do 18 inches. That line, and again, this is something that Lori Palmquist would be able to go through in a 3-hour talk, but the line spacing on the emitters are 12, 18, or 24 inches. For clay soil, typically 18 inches. And then the lines themselves would be 22 to 24 inches, maybe 18 to 22 inches. You have some ability within there to get them. spaced. Yes?
A better draining soil would be the 12-inch spacing.
Yeah, if you had sandy soil, then you may want to use 12 inches. But usually clay, it's about 18. The only time we use 12-inch also is if we're doing some kind of a lawn. You want the emitters closer together because the lawn is typically tiny little plants. Good. Thank you.
And Sherri's available here if you have any other questions. Thank you very much, Sherri.